by the year 2030, their goal is to be a world leader in AI, if not the world leader in AI.
China and other countries are racing to catch up to America having to do with AI, and we're not going to let them do it.
He is insistent that, this is a wake-up call for the U.S. tech industry. He's used this news to advance his position on artificial intelligence, which is that we should have a rollback of the Biden-era policies on this technology.
Hello again. For those just joining, I'm Susanna George, an international correspondent at The Washington Post, and I'm thrilled to be joined on stage this time by two of my Washington Post colleagues, White House reporter Kat Zakrzewski and tech policy reporter Eva Du. Thank you both so much for joining us here in New York. Eva, it's been a long goal of the Trump administration to make sure American AI companies stay ahead of the Chinese. Put this into context for us. Where does the US currently hold an advantage in AI, and where is China catching up the fastest?
Yes, so the US and China have both had intense focus on the AI industry for sort of longer than apparent. AI has been with us for decades, but if we kind of go back to this recent push, sort of 2016, when Google DeepMind came up with AlphaGo, a computer that could beat human Go masters at one of the most complex games that humanity had invented. That was sort of a wake-up moment. And it was the next year, 2017, that China came up with this national AI plan for how they were going to become a leader in the AI industry. And at that point, it seemed very pie in the sky. But actually, sort of 2025, this year, it was on their roadmap as a key year where they wanted to have sort of major achievements in AI. And then they put 2030 as the year that they wanted to become the world leader in AI. And so that has sort of set up this intense race between the US and China, where right now the US export controls for chips to China have been, there's argument to what degree it's successful, but it very much has slowed China's AI advances. And so in chips, the the US has sort of like a very significant advantage now. But in algorithms, China is catching up pretty quickly, like we've seen with DeepSeek this year. And when it comes to data that's used to train AI, China is in some ways an equal player or even more advanced.
And Kat, we've seen the Trump administration sign several executive orders around AI. Can you tell us a little bit about those actions and where this administration is particularly focused when it comes to AI?
So I would say Trump talks a lot about his America First policy when he's talking about technology, but really what we've seen is an industry first policy over the last few months. We've seen the administration take a number of actions to roll back regulations that were implemented during the Biden administration. You also see a number of moves to make it easier to build data centers domestically. And more recently, we've seen this big push within the administration to export American technology globally to ensure that in other countries they're using American technology versus that of our competitors. And so taken together, you really see moves that have boosted the AI sector domestically. And in DC, people use this term a lot that personnel is policy. And I think one of the ways you see that in this administration is who are the people writing the AI rules? And that is David Sachs, a venture capitalist, and others from the tech industry.
Eva, Chinese firms like DeepSeek and Alibaba, you were mentioning some of them earlier, offer competitive AI models at significantly lower prices, like you were saying. How has that shaped how the Trump administration is thinking about tech policy?
Yeah, we've seen sort of a big swing in policy from the Biden administration to this Trump administration. Whereas the Biden administration was seeking to throttle US AI technologies from reaching China, and sort of seeing their domestic AI progress as the biggest threat. Under the Trump administration, the new thinking is sort of China exporting its AI, whether leading edge or sort of good enough AI technology to the rest of the world, is sort of the bigger threat. And you mentioned the cost factor that very much plays into it. There is this concern China in many industries, they've wiped out competitors globally because they had good enough technology that was far cheaper, that price-wise competitors just couldn't compete with. And so there is this concern that this might happen in the AI industry. And you see this shift to prioritizing exporting the US AI stack around the world.
Kat, we've seen America's CEOs head to the White House offering lavish gifts and compliments to President Trump. I think images we're all quite familiar with. Can you explain the dynamic between this administration and the tech industry today?
Of course, it's a total reversal from what we saw with the tech industry and Biden, and even Trump in his first administration. I think some of the most defining images of this presidency have been the CEOs all standing behind him when he was sworn in as president, the pictures of Tim Cook handing him a golden statue in the Oval Office, or the fact even just a few weeks ago when he opened his Rose Garden Club, the tech CEOs were the first to dine there. And this is a real shift from what we saw in the first administration, where often you would see the tech CEOs stand up and even criticize Trump on topics like immigration. And we even saw at times CEOs out in the streets protesting those policies. And now some of those same executives are sitting side by side with him. And when I look at what's happening with the CEOs, it's indicative of a theme that I think we see in terms of how many people, global leaders, are trying to work with Trump. There's so much fear of retribution, and they're being really careful to have this kind of flattery campaign to curry influence in this administration.
Eva, you were touching on this earlier about China's more state-directed approach. How does that compare with the US strategy of public-private partnerships?
Yeah, I think traditionally the US approach has been more to support fundamental research, sort of such as with NSF grants, and to have, like, even with the Chips for America program, until recently it was sort of a grants-based program where the companies had a significant, were the ones who should be making the decisions with the market. And that's quite different than how China's approach, which has been very much based on these top-down 5-year plans. And we are seeing some changes in the US approach, such as the US government taking a direct stake in Intel, which is sort of unprecedented. So there is some convergence, but still much more state-directed in China.
And I think for a while, AI was almost synonymous with NVIDIA and NVIDIA chips. NVIDIA makes the most powerful chips to develop AI. They have a 90% market share. Can you explain a little bit the back and forth, Eva, that was going on between NVIDIA and the Trump administration?
Yeah, NVIDIA has been the pivotal company in this AI race. It's the only company in the world who's able to make such advanced AI chips. And so under the Biden administration, there was a series of steadily notched up export controls targeting NVIDIA in specific, selling AI chips to China. And under this administration, at first, Trump doubled down on it and tighten the export controls even more. But then there was this reversal, an interesting reversal, where you saw sort of the free market voices sort of win out, and so now the position is that the administration is going to rethink export controls.
And Kat, when I was the Gulf Bureau chief based in Dubai for the Post, a lot of the tech story there was this tug of war between the US and China over technology related to AI. The UAE often felt like they were caught in between the two powers there. I'm interested, earlier this year, the White House eased restrictions on exporting microchips to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. What do you think the administration is trying to do here?
So the goal here is to ensure that those states are using American technology rather than technology that's coming from China. That is the argument that we've heard from the administration when we see these deals. And it's really an attempt to learn from past tech revolutions, right? There was a situation with 5G where Chinese companies moved more quickly and offered their products more cheaply to other countries. And that resulted in one of the most powerful wireless technologies being built on primarily Chinese infrastructure. And so there's a real awareness of that with the former and even current venture capitalists who are in this White House, and they are really pushing to have deals to ensure that that's not the case. And it really is a shift in some ways, even from the Biden administration. They attempted to do a little bit in this way to exert US power on the global stage, but there was a real fear of the security concerns at the same time. And we've seen this administration, once again, like Eva just said, the private industry winning out over national security concerns.
And I feel like we can't talk about the Trump administration and technology without talking about TikTok. So I want to leave some time for that. I feel like we've been going back and forth on this for months. I think there was an announcement that Oracle will now oversee TikTok's US algorithm when the sale's completed. Can you tell us more, Kat, about how we got here? And does this set up the framework for another deal on AI in the future?
Wow, how we got here is quite the long and winding road. I was talking to our colleague Drew Harwell about this yesterday, and actually the first CFIUS, the national security investigation into TikTok, actually started when Trump was president the first time, even before we lived in a pandemic and TikTok became such a popular app for so many people. And so this is really a saga that's been playing out for many years. Ironically, President Trump was the first administration to suggest banning TikTok. That was blocked in the courts. The national security concerns persisted, and we saw Congress pass a law that would force a ban of TikTok. And I mean, I can get into all the details of we've had a Supreme Court fight and many different proposals, but just this week, we have finally heard that it appears the Chinese and US governments have agreed to a TikTok deal, like you described, where there would be an American joint venture managing this app. And it's a really interesting situation where this process to ban this app that started by a law that Biden signed is now resulted in a situation where President Trump has had a lot of control and is now putting some of his key political allies in spots where they'll be on the board and have big investments in the company. And Eva actually wrote about this today in the Post.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you both so much. Thank you for being here. This concludes today's program. Thanks to all of you at home and in the room for spending the afternoon with us. And for those who are here in person, you can please join us for a reception just outside this space. I'm Susanna George. Thanks all, and have a good night.